This conference will now be recorded.
I'll have to read. Sorry.
Yeah.
Can you hear us now?
It says audio is going through.
I can hear it.
Let you go ahead.
Yeah. Yes, it's through.
Can you hear us?
It's apparently they can.
Tom, you want to go ahead with your update?
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Do you want a new color one? I think color one. Can you go ahead with your update, Tom?
Sure. There's no other opening to the meeting. We're just going to start. Okay.
Oh,
What do you guys?
did they not? They didn't hear us. Sorry.
The first half.
We approved the meeting minutes here in the room. I think the audio wasn't working. Were there any comments on the meeting minutes for February?
Not for me.
You can move on to the air quality update.
Great. Do you guys mind advancing the slides?
Yeah, we can do that, not a problem.
All right, thanks. Just going to go through a few slides to keep folks on the TAC updated with our planning activities and the SIP chapters that we're working on right now. So we can go on to the next slide. This is the timeline. And what we do is we prepare the chapters in conjunction with the division. And you can see the topics that we prepared in February and March for the board meetings on those dates. And then I'll talk a little bit about the next two chapters, Chapter 3 and Chapter 8, and a little bit about how we do the review and endorsement process. So we're going to hopefully go through all the chapters by the June 6th meeting. Next slide. So about a week ahead of the board meeting, first Friday of every month, we post the chapters, and there's a link there if folks want to look at them. And then we introduce the chapter briefly, but not in any great detail. And then we sometimes schedule additional updates at other meetings, like the Control Strategy Committee meeting. We're going to share a summary of the comments received at board meetings. We've gotten a few oral comments, but usually we save the substantive discussion for the Control Strategy Committee meeting. And so what we're asking our board to do is review the chapters as they come out, and we can certainly respond with edits or updates so that we've got the right content in each chapter. These are all chapters that are required under the Clean Air Act that have to be sent in as a batch, to EPA. And then on the next slide, in February, we had those chapters, but we didn't receive any written comments. We did get some written comments from members of the public, and so we'll work those in the final versions. We're asking the board to approve in June. March 28th is the deadline for the chapters that were presented earlier this month, and anyone and everyone is welcome to review the chapters and provide written comments or questions. There's a kind of a catch-all email that you see there, and then we have a deadline for our chapters that I'll talk briefly about next, and that'll be April 25th from our April board meeting. Next slide. So chapter 3 is an important chapter. The Clean Air Act requires these comprehensive, accurate, current emission inventories. 2017 is the base year relative to the 2015 ozone standard. And then you look out and determine how much progress has been made by 2023. So 17 is the base year. You assess your reasonable further progress, and then it's a check-in prior to the 2026 attainment deadline. So it talks about all the different source sectors and provides an overview of the inventory for each sector. On the next slide, this is another important one, the Motor Vehicle Inspection and Maintenance Program, or I&M program. We're required, all of us here in the 9-county region, to have an enhanced program. And what this chapter does is it describes the history, what changes have been made over time, what additional technologies and evaluation tools for an I&M are employed, and to be able to track the more stringent emission standards, especially for newer cars as they're produced. It describes the boundaries of the program and the expansion to include all of Weld and half of Larimer County. There's a specific technical demonstration that the I&M program meets the enhanced requirement, and it's called a Performance Standard Modeling Equivalency Demonstration, and the division prepares that, and it's included in the chapter. On the next slide, just a brief coverage of what we're doing on our air quality analysis work update. So if you go to the next slide, I think I've showed you all this Gantt chart before. It's broken into technical, plan preparation, oversight, and consideration and action. So we're here in the first quarter of 2025 and making substantial progress on the technical work. And so we'll be rolling out more results on that on April 2nd. The control strategy planning work has been very active, and we're going to be bringing a suite of strategies to the board for their endorsement at their June meeting. RAC, acts in a planning capacity by helping prepare the chapters and generate ideas for control strategies. But once the board endorses the chapters and the control batch of control strategies, there's a formal process with their Quality Control Commission starting in July to consider those the SIP document and the strategies, culminating in a rulemaking in November. So that's when everything's supposed to come together. Eventually, the plan, after it clears the AQCC and any interest by the legislature early next year, it goes to EPA probably in the spring of 26. And we're right in the middle of the monitoring period, so we're going to continue to update folks on the ozone data throughout the summer this year, and then we'll see how it looks for 2026 when we get there. All right, next slide. So I just want to leave you all with the kind of the plan for the upcoming control strategy presentations and discussions in case you have any interest in being involved in those. So on the final slide then, this is a table of the topics that we've covered. In the second column are the times we've reviewed those with the board, and the board's doing a deep dive, so to speak, on each one of these in the months that are listed there. And then we're also doing the same kind of thing with the Control Strategy Committee. So today we just went over earlier the zero emissions forklift control concept and the mobile source emission targets concept. And then we'll take those to the board in April. In April, we'll be releasing the 2026 design values that it would indicate how much progress we think we can make towards the ozone standard. And then we'll move in the direction of the indirect sources that I briefed you all on a couple of months ago. And then in June, it wraps up by combining them into packages or slates of control strategies. And we'll go through those in May and June as it's shown there. So there's overviews of all these there's overviews of all these strategies at the second bullet there at that link called Control Concept Overviews. And you can click on the link at the bottom and you can register for any or all of these meetings. So that's my brief overview of what we're doing on those topics. Thank you.
Tom, any questions for Tom? All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the Air Pollution Control Division update with Brendan CCO.
Hey everyone, a pretty short update today. There's just one update. Last month there was a rulemaking hearing for Regulation 7 to align that with the EPA's Model Rule 40 CFR Part 60 on ozone precursor emissions by way of standardizations to pre and early production oil and gas monitoring programs. That's all the updates from the Air Division today.
Saying anything? We're not hearing anything remote.
Can you hear us now?
Yes.
I have a thumbs up.
Yes.
Oh,
So yes.
all right, start over. Start.
Okay.
No one touched the audio, remotely or downstairs.
The March 2025 TIP amendment includes 4 new projects and 3 revisions. The 4 new projects and 1 of the revisions are all MOF projects. I won't go through them, but just know that 5 of the 6 MOF projects are going into the TIP. The Taft Hill MOF project has been delayed to next month. Let's call it TDOT processing issues. All right, the other 2 revisions are from Greeley, which adds exactly $14,719,972 federal race funds to FY25 for both the US 34 and 35th Ave interchange and the US 34 and 47th Ave interchange projects. If you're wondering about these being federal funds, I've been in contact with Whitney Holcomb, who is the R4 STIP manager with CDOT. She said it was best to include these projects to show what is planned. All of the projects mentioned have award letters, including the rural grant for the 2 Greeley projects, and they feel it's best to proceed as normal. Any changes would be communicated, then all parties would proceed accordingly. The 30-day public comment period opened on April 13th and will close on March 11th. NFRMPO staff noted no disadvantages and support adding the March TIP amendment to the FY24 through 27 TIP.
Any questions for Jonathan? Can I get a motion to adopt the TIP amendment? Recommend the TIP amendment.
Motion to recommend the March 2025 TIP amendment.
Second. All right, all in favor? All opposed, same sign. All right, that is approved. Thank you very much, Jonathan. All right, and we'll move on to our first presentation, the Harmony Road I-25 interchange project presentation.
Thank you. Just as a brief opener, so Ned and Fort Collins are working together just to investigate the possibility of a study of the Harmony and I-25 corridor as an interchange. Martina and Joe have been working on compiling some data, so we just wanted to kind of share where we're at in the process. So I'll hand it over to Martina.
Good, thank you. This won't be very long. There's only about a handful of slides, hopefully just to give you a little bit of context to what we're seeing at the Harmony and I-25 corridor. We'll provide you with some detailed operational and safety information here in a minute, but the visual that you see there to start with is sort of a great context in terms of the afternoon peak hour when you've got about 2,000 vehicles that are leaving the city of Fort Collins all in just a single peak hour, headed out to the east, whether they're going to shop, whether they're going home, whether they're going to soccer games. But it really sort of represents how this is very much a regional corridor that's this connection from the west to the east. Next slide, please. Specifically, the area that we're most interested in, because this seems to be really where the pinch point is this 1 mile segment of road from Strauss Cabin to County Road 5. There are 6 signals in just this single mile, and they are managed by 3 different jurisdictions. And so that makes the operational piece a little bit more complicated. And it also, I think, shows that it's in this jurisdictional sort of seam, where sometimes it's hard to know really who's the full owner or who would have most interest in this area. So sometimes it sort of falls through the cracks a little bit because of the way that the jurisdictions work. Next slide. When we look at average daily traffic out there existing in 2025, we just redid all the counts about a month ago or so. You'll see there just on the west side of I-25, the Harmony corridor is carrying 55,000 vehicles per day. You know, that's not really unlike sort of the numbers that we're starting to see at US 34, certainly on the west side. You'll see that the numbers drop off a little bit as it heads further east. And the I-25 numbers anywhere from 70 to 85,000 daily trips. And you know, anytime that you see the interchange numbers or the interstate numbers being not all that dissimilar from the side street numbers, that tells you that there's an awful lot of people getting on and off. And that's part of what we'll talk about here in a minute. Those volumes have increased anywhere from 25 to 50% in the last 10 years, and so certainly it's an area of growth. Next. Operationally, we did new turning movement counts at all the intersections, put that all into a synchro model. And you'll see levels of service at the various different intersections, anywhere from an overall level of service of C to certainly movements or approaches that are level of service F during the peak hours. But maybe the biggest piece to talk about there is that overall that corridor is generally running at above a volume to capacity of 0.9. And so what that really tells us that it is right up button against the capacity. And so in a perfect world, if everything's going just right, you might be running pretty well. But if one little tiny thing happens, then it tends to fall apart in a really big hurry. And that's what you tend to see out there, whether it's weather, if it's an incident, if it's just someone that's slow starting from a green. As soon as you start seeing just a little bit, there's just no room there for it to absorb any kind of issues at all. So minor items can really lead to extensive congestion. We start seeing queues that impact upstream locations. And what I mean by that is that northbound off-ramp, if there's any kind of an issue on the bridge, that northbound off-ramp will queue up onto I-25. In the afternoon peak, that southbound off-ramp actually also queues out onto I-25. And then on the bridge itself, that westbound left turn onto southbound I-25 is the one that really struggles. It's a single left. It's running at above 400 in the peak hour, and it queues into the through lanes. So that northbound left turn in the morning, coming from, again, the east and the south, that volume is 935 in the peak hour. So when you tend to think of turning volumes that are often in the 300 and 400 numbers, 935 is an amazing number to be coming off the interstate. So there's a lot of volatility in here, and again, that's what leads to sort of these really unreliable travel times, where again, if everything's working all right, it just sort of, it hangs in there, and then as soon as something happens, you tend to get these really big queues of backups. So that's operations. The next slide talks about safety. We pulled all of the safety data. 230 crashes in the last 3 years in this single mile. That's a reported crash more than once a week. That's on Harmony. This does not include any of the crashes that might be occurring out on I-25 because of the queues. When we run those through the analysis for level of services safety, CDOT's evaluation, you'll see some lost fours, that one specifically at the transit center, and then you'll see some LOSs of 3 at a number of the different intersections. Again, this doesn't include any kind of crashes that might be related to queuing out on I-25. And you'll see one of the biggest issues there, and I was mentioning that northbound left turn coming off the intersection there, and you'll see the circle there. You have that triple left coming off the interchange, and it's coming into 3 receiving lanes. But that westbound left turn onto the interstate often queues all the way into that receiving lane. And so what happens is you got that triple left coming off, that inside lane realizes that their lane is queued up. Then either they hit their brakes, they rear end someone, or they sideswipe someone as they're trying to change lanes. And so, just that alone, you can see there are 15 crashes in the last 3 years specifically related to that. And those numbers are actually increasing from year to year. And so that's causing a concern, and certainly for all of us. The other
question for you, the transfer center, is that where that merge happens? I guess
there's an odd westbound merge as well. Yeah.
Is that
There's and that's not mostly the transfer center safety concern is mostly related to the fact that there's a doghouse there for the left turns. There's no ability to protect only the left turns, and it's mostly what we're seeing there are approach turn crashes. And now that officially Fort Collins has taken over that signal, you'll be hearing about that in a couple of weeks as you do your annual safety review, because that's a real challenge, and that needs to change. There's some injury crashes that are happening at the transfer center those are fixable. So the other thing that I'll just make a quick note of is that Pike Cooter Fire Authority has a new fire station 8 in Timoth. Fancy new little station. They are the closest responding agency in that entire region. However, things that are on the west side of I-25, they have found that at times it is difficult enough for them to get across the interchange because of congestion, that they at times have to reroute those calls to stations that are on the west side, even though they're a little bit further away. And so if there's a way to make the travel time across the bridge more reliable, then certainly that would help PFA as well. Next slide. Regional context. There's 4 interchanges north of 34. You have 34 and then you have 4 more interchanges. You can see the average daily traffic volumes amongst those 4 interchanges, and that the Harmony volumes there are highest of all of the interchanges that are in northern Colorado north of 34. And it has these really strong regional connections. On the far right there, you see what the daily traffic is for those major east-west corridors when you get out to State Highway 257. Again, and there too, Harmony still has a lot of volume, which just really goes to show how regional Harmony is functioning in terms of getting folks to the smaller communities further east. Next.
More question.
Yep.
Would you anticipate a Fort Collins widening prospect of those volumes, that there would be some redistribution that would happen? I guess the 22,000 vehicles per day, there's a single lane coming in and out of Fort Collins. Would we see a redistribution of some of that traffic maybe?
That's our hope.
Certainly on the west side of I-25, yes. Because right now, I mean, for the inbound piece there at Prospect is just such a challenge. The hard part is that further east, once, you get to Timnah, but then once you get to the lake there, there's not as good of a full regional connection that'll take you out to 257. So folks that live in Timnah, yes. Folks that live further east, probably would not be using Prospect.
So maybe 392.
Yeah.
Should widen that out.
Yeah. So future volumes, these are forecast volumes from both CDOT and the North Front Range. They're anticipating a 30 to 40% increase in traffic in the next 20 years, and you'll see there those I-25 numbers going to close to 100,000 ADT or just above it, south of Harmony. And then the ADT on Harmony is shown at 70,000 daily traffic, and again, that's a forecast. Certainly the current geometrics would not support that. Next. There's been a couple of recent improvements that have been made. We certainly want to acknowledge the work that's been historically done and more recently done. Restriping that CDOT did to try to get all 3 lanes across the bridge westbound, although it's created this odd merge to Nicole's point. Rebuilt the ramp terminals approaches, rebuilt the signals, and then more recently, all 3 jurisdictions worked together to not only retime the signals, but actually coordinate them together amongst the 3 jurisdictions to try to make that work a little bit better. If there aren't crashes in there, and Fort Collins is running adaptive timing on the west side of I-25 to try to get more folks in. So next slide. So sort of in summary, the information that we're seeing is that this really is a critical regional connection. There are safety concerns due to congestion and queues. There's operational concerns. There's no bike and pedestrian mobility. There's no transit considerations. And we expect sort of a high growth in volumes, and those future growth estimates don't really jive with what the infrastructure is out on the ground. And because the areas in this jurisdiction seem, it really, if you could click, whoever's doing the clicking for the slides, it really does need a collaborative review and sort of consideration of what are potential next steps. So the last slide, please. So what Fort Collins and Timnah are sort of throwing out there on the table is that it feels like it's a really good opportunity to sort of complete this comprehensive overview, sort of summarize what's been done previously, what's going on, what are the issues, what are the challenges, what are the anticipated future conditions, what's the sort of the shared regional vision, where we want this to be, how do we want it to function, what are the mobility issues that we want to talk about, what that framework looks like, and then really there's 2 things that hopefully will come out of this. Identify some short-term opportunities, and then sort of determine a long-term and multimodal mobility needs for the overall area. Dana, Tim, what did I miss? And you can click there for the last slide, I think. What kinds of questions do you have, or what did we miss?
I think we're just really trying to rally up some support as we approach CDOT to try to partner with us on this. So it's kind of a weird mix of Fort Collins, Timnit, CDOT. We're just trying to build, I guess, support and consensus that something kind of needs to be done. Not to build like a new interchange tomorrow, but just so we can kind of have an idea of what direction we're all moving as we start trying to tackle some of these problems. And maybe identify some short-term opportunities for some quick wins. And then also hopefully reach some consensus on kind of where we're envisioning this to go in the future. So as grants or other opportunities do come up, that we can, be strategically positioned. Because I think things are just going to keep growing out east, and they're already pretty grown up out west, and it's just a tricky area. I'm just interested in you guys' thoughts and feedback as we kind of continue our journey.
The other thing is to think about maybe too is when you think about the whole, your project prioritization process here, and you're thinking about the criteria by which you do that by, are there operational issues? Are there safety issues? Is it regional in nature? Is it multimodal? Are there network, pieces to this? And it just feels like this area really sort of checks all of those boxes.
Yeah, Martina, you touched on kind of the regional context. And I'm curious, in the study, do you think, in addition to those short-term goals, the long-term goal could be maybe looking at other capacity? I know you mentioned 392. Do you think that plays a factor in that study, thinking about that regional context?
Yes, it depends on how much it costs. Yes, I do. That would be lovely. You should buy 392. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, Windsor's continuing to pursue. So we'll just keep moving it forward. We're about, I would say, coming up on 70% design on that 392 line, so being in a better position. One question I had too, I haven't really looked at the Timnit Transportation Master Plan, but what's the plan for Ketcher Road? Is there ever thoughts about connecting? Yeah, connecting Ketcher Road, going east and having a parallel route.
I would love to.
Yeah.
I think I need to sell the body part or something like that, because the money is not going to cut it. So no, it was mentioned in our transportation master plan, but it was mentioned in feasible at this time. But it's something I don't know, maybe when I retire I'll get it.
I was gonna say some of these, that's right, we're seeing some of the things that were always infeasible.
No, I don't want
it.
this, but
Yeah,
it's
right.
feasible. We are putting in a signal there though, so that should be operational in April, so that should help to alleviate some of the traffic through there. But I think having a conversation on, our 392 prospect, Hector, like other, just try to help pull traffic to prioritize our projects, I think would be really critical. I do not want more traffic for Timnit personally, like that whole idea personally. But if there's a way we can help to balance this out, because it is a pretty attractive route right now, to help balance it out with other projects, that would be very helpful regionally.
Well, I think Crossroads is similar, right? If we can get, it's so short right now, but we can find ways to connect some of those. It takes pressure off of 34, it takes pressure off of Harmony, right? If we get those other connector roads to serve as a network, it helps the whole system.
Yeah, the thing with Hector too is because it's not an interchange, it tends to serve really well as an alternate route when the Harmony Bridge is a big mess. You see a whole slew of people that peel off and head over to the Hector Bridge, then come over to the Hector Bridge and they get to County Road 5, and then, they need to go left or right. And so, and I think you're seeing that happen. And certainly when the construction, we saw a lot of that happen when they were rebuilding the signals on Harmony. So I think it's an important alternative. Again, in the short term, it's probably not going to extend beyond County Road 5 because of private property opposition there. But I think, to your question about, can we find regional alternatives? I think that's a really important piece. How much of this can, 392 take, what's reasonable for Mulberry? How much can Harmony really take? And I think part of the intent of doing this is to sort of see where's that sweet spot between how much more can we really get out of Harmony, what's reasonable. I don't think there's a lot of discussion about rebuilding the bridge on Harmony. And so it's like using the bridge that we've got, what might we be able to get out of it? How can we add bike and ped mobility to it? And then support other network connections, because yeah, the reality is that 70,000 ADT that's proposed is just, it's not gonna happen. Those are gonna have to go somewhere else. And so, but could we get Harmony to 60 or 65, right? And then have those other 10 go elsewhere? I think that's part of what the intent would be of the study is like, from a regional perspective, how do we make this all work? And 392 is an important piece of it, so keep working on that.
And smoothly and slowly, like, again, not to make it too fast or anything like that, but like a smooth operation that is predictable, expected, without like, we're backing up to college, we did it wrong.
Well, and Prospect, I think there's such opportunity there, because the bridge, I-25 piece, the expensive part is built. What we need is that connection, and as a frequent user of all of these systems, Prospect has so much opportunity that's really low hanging fruit, because it's really the city side of that needs to be done, and I think that could really help move some of that traffic away from Harmony. And then the other lesson learned is having sat where you all sit now, the sharing of that. Loveland manages the signals through 34 and I-25. Having some sort of one owner that is sort of helping to manage all of those signals, that I didn't realize how helpful that would be. And I know there are challenges to that, and we'd explored it previously with Tim as an opportunity, but having one system to manage and having one person as the point person to manage all those signals.
You can have our
Yeah, but having one owner of that whole system really is helpful, because then you're not looking at each other when there's something that's screwed up. There's one person in charge, there's one person that gets called out for those things, and that the model that Loveland had previously before I got there is really a strong model, and they're going all the way out. And as we're doing transit signal priority stuff, it's helpful to have one system that all of that is on. So just a food for that, and lesson learned having that in those seats, it really would be beneficial for one agency to step in and, yeah. Just really amazing. Sure.
Yeah, you touched on bike and ped. I guess there's maybe bike lanes on either side. Is there any issue with bike or pedestrian fatalities or injuries, kind of like with Mulberry? Is there a lot of people using that as bike route, or is it more just going up to the food trailer or something different?
There's limited bike and ped movement on Harmony, and no bike or ped crashes in the last 3 years. There's been certainly some interest in some of the micromobility, because it's geofenced right there, so I can't get to Walmart. And so, there's very much an interest in finding better and more comfortable ways to accommodate bikes and peds, because it is certainly not very comfortable to be out there now. And so I think it's an important component to looking at the overall system. Does it make sense if we keep the bridge? Could we reallocate some of the space on bridge and then put, bike and ped bridges on either side, for instance? Is that a way to increase the overall mobility options in the area, without rebuilding the bridge, for instance, is one of the thoughts. So certainly we had early on explored whether we could just sort of assume that all bikes and peds could be at the Hoover River Bridge, but that's a ways away, and so that's pretty out of direction for folks that are needing to use that for sort of a commuting mobility purpose. Recreationally, that's great, but for someone that's using, a bicycle to get to and from wherever, that's a long way out. So we're not really seeing that as the only alternative. It's a great alternative, but not as the only alternative. So I think that the multimodal piece of it, I think, is important. And if we don't want to rebuild the bridge, finding ways to accommodate that so that we can get rid of that westbound left turn, mess on the bridge.
Without just feeling like.
Without just dealing with
Yeah.
it. It's great.
But it's a lot less expensive to build a separate bicycle lane, just like a
Get
bridge.
a ped bridge, then that might be an option. And then keep the bridge. But again, those are the kinds of things I think that there's a lot of opportunities to try to find some ways to support mobility and improve safety, that doesn't necessarily, require a $200 million change or whatever they're talking about. So,
Detectors a safe alternative. I know they've done a lot of work on it.
Yeah, there's been a lot of work recently trying to make sure that bicycles get across that bridge successfully through the 3 interchange.
But we're working on our side as well.
yeah, and west of the interchange too, right? I mean, that used to be super tight in there. I mean, so years and years and years ago, it was really hard to see shoulders on it. So it's, the multimodal piece is important.
Other comments? It was great. Exciting to see this. Thank you all. Any other questions? Anyone online have questions or comments? Thank you. All right, we will move on to the NFRMPO safety dashboard. Kayla.
All right, first thing, just a heads up, the links, for whatever reason, when converted to a PDF, the second line didn't get included in the actual link. So if you're going to be opening up the dashboard today, over the next few days, just make sure to copy and paste the full link that's in there. Just as a heads up, apparently I can make dashboards work in GIS, but not make a link. So, just as some background to this, this sort of sentiment really came up at the January council meeting whenever I was discussing with council about the regional safety performance measures. The sentiment really was, how do we know if this is working if we don't have any recent data to look at? Our data when it comes to safety and crashes is so behind. It's kind of too late before we know, would we even meet these targets or not that we're setting? So that's kind of the background behind this. So first, some acknowledgements. It's important to keep in mind that every data point in the dashboard reflects people impacted by a crash, whether that be, they did not come home ever, or, they are seriously impacted for the rest of their life from injury. And there are no acceptable number of fatalities or serious injuries on our roadway network. And just as a whole, the NFRMPO and our member communities have agreed to work towards eliminating fatalities and serious injuries through a safety vision towards zero death policy and by setting these regional safety performance measure targets for the past 2 years that we have set those targets. So we'll take a look at the dashboard here in a few minutes, but just, first, this is what's included in the dashboard. So there are fatal and serious injury crashes from 2019 to 2023 for now, mapped within the NFRMPO region. Really, 2023 is the last year that we have data available from CDOT. So if we were to start to incorporate more recent data, we would have to work with our communities to get that data. In the dashboard, you can filter by the community, the county, the injury type, the vulnerable road user type, with those being pedestrians, either cyclists or people using e-bikes or people on motorcycles, and by the crash year. And then there are, the dashboard calls them indicators, but it's really just the number of each either crash type or injury type here from this list. So it will tell you the number of fatal and serious injury crashes, the number of fatalities, the number of serious injuries, the number of pedestrian crashes, the number of bike or e-bike crashes, and the number of motorcycle crashes. As well as you can also just click on individual data points and see even more information about each crash. So again, this is the link. Again, if you're going to open it up yourself on your own computer, just make sure to copy and paste that full link. And this will be set to a public viewing setting until 5 p.m. this Friday. If you want to look at this further after this meeting and maybe provide me any additional comments, feedback up until that, that'd be great. So whenever you first open up the dashboard, it just pops up with a splash screen first. It says, this is what's in the dashboard. The data comes from CDOT. what the different colors mean. So fatal only crashes are in red, serious injury only crashes are in orange, and crashes that include both a fatality and a serious injury are in blue. Then it goes on to describe some of the functionality in the dashboard, and then, if you have any questions, reach out to me, and then it just gives the date and time the dashboard was last edited. So then once you, hit OK on that, it opens up to this. So this is what that dashboard looks like. And then here, boxed in red, these are the filters that you can use. So you can select more than one filter at once. And then here are the indicators. These are the numbers of each crash type or the total number of fatalities and serious injuries. And then this just is an example of as you start to filter that data or you decide to just zoom in and out, those numbers will update based on either what you selected or what you zoomed into. And as you make selections, it will just zoom into like as close as it can get, but still show you where all those crashes are. And then whenever you actually click on a data point, it will tell you all of this information. I wrote it out a little bit bigger than what's in the image on the right there. But I do just want to note that this is still a draft version. It's still in progress. So there are some crashes in there where the data has not been, fully checked for accuracy, or some fields that just kind of need to be edited a little, changed. For example, like sometimes when we get the data from CDOT, it gives us numbers that we then have to tell, like, oh, number 7 is this. So some of those aren't updated yet, just because I wanted to kind of put some feelers out, see how we felt first before editing things we may or may not want in this dashboard. And then just another example of that is when I put in the date, it automatically put in a time, even though I have a separate field for time. So the time in the date field is just like what it automatically put in for now. But this is just really to see, do we like how this dashboard works or not for now. And then on the part of the actual map, there is a button in the top left that allows you to make your own selection. So you're able to, use like a rectangular tool, a circular tool, or a lasso to select a certain area, and then all the indicator numbers will automatically update for an area. So, for example, if someone wanted to look at, the area around the Harmony Road and I-25 interchange, you could just draw yourself a circle, a lasso, a rectangle in that area, and kind of understand what type of serious injury or fatal crashes are happening in that area. And then on the right side, you're able to change the base map if you want. You can open up the legend, look at the layers as well. Just if, it's a little bit easier for you to see with a different base map, or if you want to know what the colors on the map mean again. So I'd be taking over the computer to actually open it up with you all. So just as an example, you're able to actually go in and click. Let's say if you want to look at serious injury crashes only, you can click on it and you can see that the numbers start to update. And let's say we want to only look at them for 2023. You can use multiple filters to go in and select. And you could even say, I also want 2022, just as an example. And you're able to, there's a reset button for each filter. And there's also like a little kind of circular arrow button that you can just fully reset the dashboard with. You want to just reset everything. And then as well, if you just zoom in, it'll start to update the numbers. And then let's just say if you want to we'll just use a rectangle as an example. Say you want this area here. It will update the numbers for just what you have selected by yourself. And so, does anyone have any questions up to this point? We'll take a pause while the dashboard is open.
So you're gonna, switch it from public at the end of the week, is the plan to then eventually share it publicly?
So right now it's just set to public so that you all can take a look at this now yourselves, play around with it. After Friday, I will be closing it just to start to incorporate any of the feedback from this meeting, just because we don't want, just anyone and everyone to be able to find this dashboard. Because really the only settings were to keep it private to just me, private within our organization, or for you all to see it, it has to be set to public for now.
And once it's incorporated all of the feedback, then we'll take it to council, and then once they approve it, then it'll.
Yes.
There be any way to add each municipality's growth management area and click on that particular filter?
Yeah, I can definitely play around with different layers. So if anyone else has any other recommendations, I can play around with that. It's my first time making a dashboard. So I've been playing around with it a lot. Well, thank you. But yeah, I can look into that.
Yeah, that's great. I love like the year. I think that's really helpful, and I know there's a way to show data like, like a serial chart so you can see patterns over time. So I think this is great to be able to toggle on and choose different years, but it might be nice to also have the option to like see it progress as well. Have you, I guess I know we talked about it at the planning commission meeting, there was some discussion about getting more current data in there. If municipality, I guess, have we talked at all or thought about having municipalities provide complete years of data like 2024 once that?
Not yet, and I have some discussion questions a couple slides ahead where we can chat about that. But just for some context, once our police officers complete a report, it gets submitted first to the Department of Revenue at the state. So they're the first ones to kind of get the data. And then once they are done with it, it then goes to CDOT, and that's a part of the reason why the process takes so long. It also just kind of doesn't help that different municipalities use different software to, compile their reports and actually get it submitted. Some municipalities still do paper reports instead of electronic reports. So it takes CDOT a while to process things, and I know just Dr. Cog has the same issues that we do where they aren't allowed the data any earlier than when CDOT releases it to the public. So I know Dr. Cog is trying to lobby for trying to get that data faster, maybe from the Department of Revenue or as soon as CDOT gets it, but
Join them.
we can. But just from talking with them some about it, there's just concern that without any sort of, law legislation, that may not actually be able to happen, unfortunately.
So each municipality hand over their individual data to you guys directly? And that's what I thought, planning council was asking. Yeah. That's what I gathered, what they were asking from us.
And make it display.
Because they have this.
Well, I would say first, look at what's in here.
Yeah.
For your area, for your municipality, or wherever your jurisdiction is. Make sure it's correct before sending anything to you. But yes, I don't know how big this file is.
But if we did we came up with a commonality, we did point files, just the found what the core data was, regardless of whether we're using Crash Magic or whatever else we're using to process it, we're probably all putting it into GIS at some point. So there's some sort of, and I'll shut up. GIS people talk about how we might send it, but I think there's probably a good common way we could send our data. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I think, like, if, like, the dashboard is great, I love the concepts and the functionality, but if we're all looking at it and saying, oh, we have better data, you know, it'd be great if we can find a way to share that. Most correct, I think you have. Well, just having this for, even if we have good data, seeing those edges, like 287 and 392 was one of those intersections that it's right on the edge of Fort Collins, so we had some of the data, Monroe County had some of the data, so we were years behind in seeing when we had real problems in that location. And so this is great to see those edges and those gaps where we might not have a complete set of data locally, so this is already a benefit in those areas for sure.
And yeah, there isn't from the dashboard a direct data download, but you know, as it gets updated, you know, we can, you know, keep updating, you know, maybe the, you know, regional crash data shapefile, you know, from our website that we share files on already. So, you know, if you're looking at a more, you know, regional project that crosses those jurisdictional boundaries, then you already have a data set that is already put together. You don't have to worry about combining the data from different jurisdictions if it's already there. And then kind of just a note on like the timing, just from doing research about other MPOs crash dashboards, you know, most of them are at least a year or two behind in the data. There was only one that I could find that was any quicker than that. It was the Indianapolis MPO's crash dashboard. They had data current up to, I think, 2 months prior is what they had updated through. And then they take, you know, the 1 or 2 months after a crash happens to, you know, validate the data. They are able to get their data directly from the state. So just from my research, you know, if we are able to get data quicker, you know, we could potentially be the first MPO or COG doing this kind of thing. So it would be quite a feat if we could. Yeah.
So really cool dashboard, and I think as far as MPOs, I haven't seen an MPO put one together like this. I think I mentioned to you a couple months ago, I was actually the developer for the Kansas Drag Zero dashboard, and one of the benefits of pulling from that DOT side data is the consistency. And you can leverage, you know, that time series data, all the different emphasis areas, and it's consistent, right? So it's not going to break the dashboard, right, if there's variance in the data types. So there's that kind of inherent trade-off for how much data you can leverage. I think too, though, just looking at what you already have in here from the DOT, I think there's a lot, there's additional widgets you could develop to create more insights. One of the things that was a big takeaway from working with Kansas stakeholders was law enforcement's interest in that tool for targeted enforcement to actually, you know, tackle some of those impaired driving crashes. And so they could use that time series data, looking at impaired data to see where those kind of trends were happening. So I think there's a lot of value in kind of getting to that vision zero, tapping into those different metrics. So I'd say keep that in mind. And then also with law enforcement, it was kind of that carrot to say, hey, this isn't just an insurance exercise. If you fill out the form, if we get that data, then we can better leverage it for insights, and they can also use it for their purposes as well. So yeah, I think there's a lot of trade-offs in how that data gets collected and the timeliness, like what you actually need to get collected for the dashboard.
Yeah, I don't know if anyone has ever looked at Dr. Cog's crash dashboard. They include all crashes, but they include a lot of those extra metrics. So, I mean, if anyone wants to take a look at that and be like, hey, I want that too, you know, they've already offered, you know, their hand to me and saying, you know, we're willing to help you. So.
Can you put the link that are theirs? Well, I was going to suggest that maybe Michaela send an email to the TAC members, and then you guys have the links.
Okay. Yeah, I can send a link to theirs too, because they'd be able to actually tell me how they built that part of the dashboard, which would help.
Just from a curiosity standpoint, since we're a little behind here, how many communities have a municipal crash system and which ones do you use? I'm just curious if we're all the same already and everyone's already got it. Your crash measure.
Crash.
What do you, do you have one?
Well, yeah, Stephen.
Okay, yes, you have one.
We use Vision Zero Suite, the TAC system.
Okay.
We're crash measure.
We get ours from CSB.
What was that?
We get our crash data
Okay.
from State Patrol,
From State Patrol, okay.
but we get it ahead of the 2-year.
I think all of us that have systems are probably getting it direct right away.
It's true. Okay. Anybody, question, I think, okay, anybody on the phone? Oh, please.
Right, so I mean, anyone that's using the Vision Zero Suite would likely be using the CDOT data. You know, they'll be a little bit behind. Folks that are using Crash Magic likely are getting it direct from their own PD and then doing their own scrubbing. And I know Larimer County, they don't use Crash Magic, and they don't use Vision Zero Suite, but they just do their own thing. And so theirs is more current as well. So it's, I think it's just one of those, it's one of the challenges for local data because it can be much more current. But it's, you know, if you start trying to add local data into the CDOT data, then you sort of get this big challenge of, you know, what's overlapping and what's not overlapping and how is it scrubbed or how is it not scrubbed, and where might you have missing data. Because it might be really helpful to be like, oh, look, you know, we've added Fort Collins and Loveland and Windsor, you know, into the data source, and someone's looking at that saying, well, dang, Evans is doing great. You know, well, it's because they don't add their own data in. And so you want to probably be really careful about if you're going to add more current data, you probably need to try to add it from everyone. And then getting that, the consistency piece, I think, is certainly a challenge.
Yeah, and that's kind of part of the reason to take pause now before moving forward to actually, you know, make sure the data is fully accurate, you know, just kind of clean things up a little because, you know, if we are bringing in data from you all, you know, just want to make sure, you know, does it mesh with the data we already have or does it need to be started over, you know, so yeah.
One last suggestion. Is it possible to add a layer that shows all the regionally significant corridors and trails? And then on top of that, if you were to filter out a particular significant corridor, can you automatically have it select those crashes?
I can work to see if I can, at least with the filtering for a quarter. But yeah, I know I can add the layers on. So yeah, thank you. Let's go ahead and run real quick because I've got some additional discussion questions. So really the desired outcomes of this are to make crash data more accessible to the public and to partner agencies, to have a crash dashboard that can be used or referenced when planning for regional projects and for future calls for projects. And here in bold is to add in more recent crash data to more quickly understand if we are making progress on our regional safety targets. And then these were the questions I had come up with. I know we have already started to kind of touch on these. So feel free to read through these. We can start to chat them through. Also, you can send me follow-up emails after today to discuss further if you think of something else.
I have just with the planning commission conversation about this, I think it might, before we go back to them, to have some thoughts about, even if we don't have a complete set of data that's more current, but we have a little asterisk, okay, everything for 2024, the communities that opted in and shared their data, it's not a full set, we aren't gonna do our measures off of all of that. However, this is, you know, for your information only, a set of data that is more current than I think their request was to get something that was more current than what CDOT's able to do, and I'm sure there was more to that, we didn't dig into it too far, but that's what I sort of heard as the request, and so maybe it's worthwhile to just say, it might not be possible to get a perfect, complete set, but we can get something in there that's more current.
Yeah, and I mean, it would take at this point everyone participating to have that full set.
Yeah.
Of
And we might not have that, there might not be communities that have resources to do that, right? We probably can't get a completely full set, but we could get something that gives us indicators of how things are trending that's more current than what CDOT can produce. And I also think it's wise for us to keep, we can partner with Dr. Cog in that conversation with the state. I think that's something that's been going on for a very long time, and it isn't working. And so whatever we can do to help lean into that conversation and stress the importance of processing these data more quickly, I think would be good.
Yeah, I mean, every, statewide meeting that has to do anything with crash data, it's being brought up every single time. I have 4 times monthly, I have, meetings with the CDOT group. They've been focused on the SHSP recently, but, that gets brought up every time, or at, other statewide meetings with CDOT there in the room and people with the Department of Revenue. So we're trying.
So in that email, could you also include, for those who have 2024 crash data, just yes or no if you have it, so that way we can figure out how many people to ask this for. So everybody may not have it.
We may rely on some of our experts in GIS to tell us how we all come together and deliver something.
Michaela, you mentioned earlier the kind of the work you guys are doing to change the field names and types from CEDA. I do think just having worked through that, there's a way you can translate that in the dashboard itself to, let's say if it's a 5, here's the number range, here's the name values. I don't know on that. The other thing we wanted to make sure on ours, maybe something to consider is a disclaimer. We use the USC, 23 USC 407. That kind of text is kind of standard, I think, a lot of crash reporting. So.
Thank you. I want to highlight in these questions, really number 4, which is what is the best meeting format to continue these conversations? Is this something that I keep coming to TAC about? Do we need to set up separate meetings as a group? Do I need to meet one-on-one with each community about this? Really, where does this go next? Because it's not ready to go to April council, I would think.
I felt like this was good. A lot of meaningful conversation today.
But are the right people to have the conversation about the data?
Yeah, that makes it good.
Yeah. So would that be a separate meeting that we can
invite additional? Yeah. Yes, we can do that. I think that would be great. We have GIS.
It would be helpful to do it all together though, like with the other communities.
Yes.
Especially for those of us who maybe don't have it yet, we could probably have somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that sounds good. And is this something where we, have a first meeting and then from there kind of determine how does this continue and what structure? Is this a monthly meeting, a quarterly meeting, this is new, so I'm not exactly sure what it means. So do we want to commit beforehand to, more than one meeting or just see how it goes first?
And maybe we gather that group together with some of the technical experts or owners of the data if we get those folks together. So maybe in your email you could ask for contacts for who from each municipality should be included in that. Then we can get together and sort of figure out what the ongoing algorithm is.
Do you anticipate creating more dashboards like this or like similar applications?
This is awesome.
Yeah,
For us visual learners.
we can. If there's any specific data types that you're interested in, that would be helpful.
The equity stuff you guys have done in the past is helpful. I think these visual tools are super helpful.
So maybe keep that in mind, like as we look through this deliverable or product, like what can we replicate for future, what works in terms of getting the data piece figured out, the interface figured out.
Maybe we'll revisit in item 11. Any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you. This is awesome.
Yeah, and then just real quick, these are just kind of the next steps. You know, later, the second half of this month, early April, I'm gonna start to, you know, make those changes to the dashboard just based off today's conversation. And you know, it's ongoing to continue editing the data points to increase the accuracy, although it sounds like, you know, maybe hold off on that for now, see how we can get the data from you all first, see what that looks like, and then also just ongoing to schedule meetings, you know, outside of TAC or come back to TAC for discussion, and then eventually it will be presented at a future council meeting. But yeah, this is my contact information, and again, I just want to remind you, if you're opening up the link, copy and paste the whole thing. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Becky.
So we have been working to develop a task for the FY 2026 and 2027 UPWP, so this is a new UPWP. So the tasks were sent with a link in the memo for TAC members to review, just to see what's in those tasks, as well as the potential deliverables. And I say potential until it's approved by council, and they should be ready for service. So we have revised some things, some tasks have been taken out because they've been completed, so the state household survey, as well as the NOCO study has been taken out because that will not, those will not continue into FY 26. So any comments that any of the TAC members may have, if you could send those to me by March 31st. That way I can incorporate them before it goes to TAC, to council. Also need to include in the appendices, so just a write-up of the task, any planning tasks that you all may have, or if there's any planning tasks that are in the current UPWP that will be rolling into FY 26, if you could just let me know. I know there's a lot of things from FTA, so transport has things, but those are more from the previous fiscal year, and I know Josh is not online. But any of the SS4A studies that may be continuing on into FY 26, just let me know, and I'll just make sure that they're included in that. Anything selected in the MMOF, so I'll need writers for the really projects for FY 26 and 27. So, I can talk to you offline about those for that. But we'll need those to be included to go into the full document that will go out for public comment on April 9th, so when the next April TAC packet goes out, we'll post that for public comment, and then it will go to the main council. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, otherwise you can send me any comments.
What if you're unsure about your SS4A award? Like,
Yeah.
right now it's currently in limbo.
Yeah, then we will hold off until the contract is finalized.
Okay.
Yeah, unless you have a contract, we don't need to put it in there.
Okay.
And then if you do receive it, because there's no funding attached, it's just a write-up of what the plan is, and it's in an appendix. We can just mod it in, so that it's a modification, but we just do it administratively. And we just want to issue the NFTAC. It doesn't have any formal action.
Okay.
Good with Becky for the in your firm. Getting back on time.
Well, I don't know. So in the handouts packet, I included two items for this discussion today. So the day after council, I did send out a data request to those communities who have projects that are on this very hard to see list, very tiny list, which is, I will say, broken up by corridor. And then I did include the votes received for the projects on the sites that they're not in sort of priority, like vote order, but they are in order by corridor. So I sent the data request out, and I received back information from two
communities, so thank you to those of you that responded to that. Data requests, but I don't know that, we can have an informed discussion if we only have 2 communities that provided the data. So, in talking with Nicole and Evan earlier this week, we decided to come and have a discussion about the scoring criteria. So this is a little bit blind by intentionally. So we can talk about this scoring criteria. If this is what, so what's up on the screen right now. If this is what we want to score, and these are the sort of the data points, and then the weighting of those scores, and then give you guys who either responded and you want to add additional context, or haven't had a chance to because it was a lot of stuff. If you can respond to that, so I can incorporate all of that, populate this spreadsheet, and then we can have a really good informed discussion on these projects next week. So this priority scoring criteria was originally developed with the workshop that we had in 2020. And it did come from the scoring criteria that the TC had created at the time. So I don't know if you might remember, there was a multicolored sort of table chart that had these different criteria. So safety, mobility, economic vitality, asset management, strategic nature, regional priority, and project readiness. So these are what the TC and CDOT staff, headquarters staff came up with. These were, the bullet points are things that they had as sort of sub-bullets, or what does safety mean? Okay, that's a known safety issue, then yes, it would get a higher score. It has, LOSS of 3 or 4, so then those would, if it had a lower score, then it would maybe get full 25, it would get, 12 or something like that. So these all came from the TC criteria, the various different bullet points. And then the one that didn't come from them, they just had regional priority, which was sort of left open because it could mean the CDOT region, it could mean the TPR, the MPO. So for this one, we had put the 6 priority corridors that council has selected. And if it was on one of those, they got the full 10 points, just automatically. I did not change this at all. Given the Harmony corridor being added, I just left this. This is what we had in 2020 and what was at the 2025 one that we had in January. So first off, keeping these overarching categories, since they are what the TC looks at for the projects that go on the state list, the bullet points, is there anything that you want to have added? Is there anything that might make more sense to include? We can add things. I don't know that I would advise taking anything away, since we did kind of pull these from the criteria. So I'll open for discussion. Anyone has any comments? All right. Well, if you don't have comments about the bullet points and the scores, the maximum scores, the weighting criteria, are there any comments? Should any be increased, decreased? It looks great.
I don't think safety should be more one of our higher guys and expert here, but feels like something.
So where would we want to take? Well, first, how much would you want to add, and then where would you want to take?
Struggle with thinking through asset management scoring for some of these
Yeah,
products.
yeah. And that's gonna be hard to be, I think all of us would say, new is better, we would like a new thing, but that one's gonna be just hard apples to apples, so if you make that score lower.
And then, or that it's kind of a new piece of infrastructure isn't necessarily asset management benefit.
Yeah, because they have to take care of all the new things.
And the 2 planning studies also don't.
They would not score
Yeah.
well in those.
Yeah. So we can, okay, decrease that to 5, okay. Make it 30. Okay.
And then what about regional priority? Does that need to be 10 or would we want to put that down to 5? It's kind of a given, like they're all gonna score. Like you saw in the spreadsheet I sent, everything is X.
The regional priority. What's the difference between strategic nature and like regional priority? Like what are, like, are you kind of getting like double points for some of those with the regional and statewide significant?
I think the ability to leverage funding
Yeah.
or
So
those.
is that, okay, so that was one from itself, that one.
Yeah.
Like the strategic nature.
I think so.
We were honest.
I think the strategic nature are, Greeley, for example, has a developer right now that could be a funding partner in some of these things, and so maybe some of those projects score higher because they've got a developer that can help pay
And
match parts.
yeah, and some of these are cross jurisdictions as well, so those
So
could
it's not
also.
necessarily regional or statewide significance, so that's not regional priority. That's the one sentence.
And I don't remember, I know they updated it with GHG, including that, but, I mean, if these projects are within the RTP, then they've already gone through that, so then obviously they contribute to reducing that, so I don't think we need to add that specifically to this.
The regional priority, I guess this is the point of doing this presentation, it's saying what is our priority, so I wonder if we.
With planning commission's question about like prioritizing corridors, how does that play in?
So,
Or what's the plan, I guess, there too, for that question, I guess, there.
I know there was a lot of discussion about we should need to have a corridor and don't have the projects because then that would cause, projects to compete against each other. Except we've been asked by CDOT Region 4 to give them projects because we need to have something to advocate for and they need to have something to advocate for and it works. So I would say, we could say that whatever the corridor is the highest priority corridor. I think, personally, I would say let's go through the scoring of all of these projects and just see what comes to the top. And if it's all of the, 287 projects, then maybe 287 is the highest scoring. Versus, or if it's all the 34 projects or whatever is at the top. So I say let's let the data tell us first and then see where that lands. And this is not on the agenda. I know this is going to be very exciting. This isn't on the agenda for the April council meeting, so you don't get to hear me talk about it. You hear me talk about other things, but not about this. Because I want to give us all a chance to provide the data, use the time to populate the data, and then have a chance to review it prior to coming to the meeting next month. So, thank you.
What can you make sure that the data is apples to apples versus apples to oranges?
Like you lived this before. This is why I'm like, this is why I came so discouraged last time, because we just went through all this with the 34 projects, and it is hard to.
That's why I tried to when we were talking about this, day after the council meeting, we tried to make it so that it would be some stuff that are data points that everyone would have. Maybe not for the 34 study or the I-25 Harmony interchange, but for the rest of them, which those two are planning studies, and I did ask council if they wanted to pull those out since they are so small compared to these other projects, and why couldn't we find $1 million? If we're trying to fund these, finding $1 million is a lot easier than 10 million. But they wanted to keep them in, so I think for those two, take them. Those two, the odd men out. But some of this, when Greeley, so Hannah responded on behalf of Greeley, and she had a couple of things where she said, well, could this come from your model? So we could pull some of this stuff from our model, and then that way it's apples to apples. But the crash data, the safety data, you guys might have more, you guys will have more current data on that. So, but you also will have, I would hope the delay, so, and some of these other answers to these other questions we won't have. So.
What's in here is what we landed on for the 34 stuff, so we can take that data and bring it over, but it was hard to get apples to apples for everything.
So we can look at, go through our model, see what we can pull up for this. I don't know. We can see 25 2025 might be the year we settle on.
I like that model because of the growth, the anticipated growth. That is what we oversee. Some of these are lagging indicators, right, after the problem already exists, but we use the model to look at projected.
Is there a way within the point scoring itself to help define like what a 10 is versus like what a 5 is versus like what a 1 is when people are scoring it? Because I like my project, doesn't mean I did do all top scores, but it doesn't mean it actually is. So yes, we could do that, like we had with all the projects in 23 and then the MMOF where we said, okay, this is what a 5 would be versus a 10. I can go back and think through this and then run that past Nicole and Heather and send it out to you guys.
You could help from like an asset management, 'cause it's like, oh yeah, we would like it rich, we would like it to be 10. Oh yeah, really, you don't need it to be rich, zero. That's not cool.
Right, who's actually going through and doing this scoring? Are you gonna look at the data or are we doing that together?
Well, I'm gonna populate this.
Okay.
Yes. So yes, I will.
We send our data in.
Yeah, and then I'll put it all together.
together.
So you're not looking at, 15 different emails with attachments and trying to figure it all out.
But then we're scoring.
You will be scoring, yes.
We'll be scoring your own.
We may judge you later when we look at your table.
Information in.
Yeah.
And then you guys take the information and do the scoring.
Okay, I think I'm understanding. And then just back to the whole regional corridor prioritization. So I definitely understand using data and trying to, be objective. But I also think there is a lot of value in coming together as a region around specific corridors that we want to push forward. So maybe there's a way with the scoring to say, like, these are our priority corridors, so they're going to get a higher score for that category. It's a relatively lower score, but maybe that's a way to capture that and at least reflect that we heard that from the council. I do think that will help in some of the, like, telling the story behind some of these projects as well.
I think the data is a good place for us to understand all of the different things that we're all dealing with, right? We know our own projects so well and we understand, but kind of seeing that data set across the region and then I think we can make decisions and move forward after that, not just necessarily taking the data and spitting it back out. But when we see it all together, then we want to come together and make decisions based on the data. It's good. So.
And, it may say, yes, 34 is the highest priority, or it could say, I don't know, 287 or 382, whatever the data tells us, and then we can make a decision about how we want to present that to council.
And then the last piece I would also add is that we did go, through the workshop in January, we did get votes, so we don't want to, I think that's still an important data point as well, so maybe we capture some of that. Maybe that's in a call.
Yeah, so what if for a regional priority, we can say, if you got 1 to 5, you get 5 points. If you got 6 to 10, then you get 10. But if you got 6 to 10, you get whatever. Something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point.
And then
So one of the issues we ran into with the 34 TAC was that we looked at volume over capacity and it covered just the main line, it covered the CDOT data. But what if there's a turning movement or something that you're having operational issues with? How does that pop up? And how does that get scored in here if we're only looking at volume over capacity?
we can add the name. This is your scoring criteria, so this is the chance to change that. If you want to add that in, then we can.
Yeah, if these criteria don't work.
Yeah, I mean, these are overarching, like the bold criteria, so safety, mobility, and all that, we have to keep it. But the rest, yeah, if you want to add that.
And that's where we started getting at apples and oranges, because there's some problems that are looking at mainline congestion, others are looking at, left-hand turn congestion and other stuff, and how do you put them on the same plane?
Yes.
Where is,
We're trying to we lived through the very complicated version of this, we're trying to make this
not to overcomplicate, continue to overcomplicate. So some of the projects on the list are pretty expensive for like what they're asking to do and like the benefit that they're providing. There could be essentially like other solutions, like, you
widening process.
Widening process, yeah,
That's a
exactly.
good example.
So it's like, how does the cost play in for the benefit ratio? So it's like, hey, you know, you guys want to do interchange, great, but if you were to do this instead, maybe it helps. You know, so that, should that project get higher, you know, it's like, yeah, that's the ultimate solution, but we can't afford the ultimate solution for everybody, the amount of money. So is there any points towards like cost benefit or something like that,
Or scalability of the project, being able to deliver it in phases over time or something like that.
Yeah, we have the strategic nature, which says balances short-term needs versus long-term trends. Project readiness, so we've got local funding availability, commitment, funding package readiness, environmental studies identified and can be mitigated, right-of-way acquired, or required. We can stick it with project readiness or strategic nature.
I think strategic nature makes sense. Like, I think there's some projects that,
like if you're getting 50% from a developer, that helps you out, like versus, you know, so maybe that's helping to offset your cost benefit ratio a little bit, so maybe there's a couple ways to like think about it or something, but it's.
and also I think this is why, like, at least I struggle with like all the separate projects, because they are all part of this overall system, right? So we know that improvements in some areas might relieve pressure in another area, so that's
Fix
why.
the intersections, the corridors.
Right, so it's like, that's why I get that, yeah.
I don't want us to overthink this too. They want us to prioritize this, doing it with a little bit of data. It helps us to have some clarity when we take a list of priorities back. And as the technical advisory committee to the planning commission, our job is to give them sort of the technical perspective on this. So we had talked last time about our recommendation was maybe not to go through this priority exercise for this very reason, because we're gonna spend a ton of time spinning our wheels. And really, if you're able to leverage funding and get your projects built, you're gonna get them built, right? We're not necessarily, we will be competing against each other for the regional funding, but we'll be trying to get our own funding in our municipalities too. So I think this exercise, let's have a data-driven process, but not spend too much time overthinking.
Yeah.
I think from a corridor side, just like overall, like taking the corridors out of the projects and like the need or whatever, looking at like our transportation network, I-25 is our spine. You know, it is always going to be the north-south route that connects all our east-west routes. You're not getting on US 34 realistically without going through I-25. That corridor, while it doesn't need, you know, to be widened out anymore, you know, it is our number one priority corridor as far as functionality goes that we need to maintain. And then from that, US 34 probably would be our next one, and then the rest of our east-west roads as we kind of build out our network. Trying to then say like US 287 is our next top priority, we need to dump all of our money into US 287 seems, without, you know, like looking at all the projects across our entire network, it seems like there could maybe be like weighting based on like maybe where you fall within the corridors, but let's not lose focus, like I-25 is the backbone of the entire network, and then the rest of them, so maybe there's like a weighting that can be applied without saying like US 287 is our next top priority, you know, priority corridor or something like that, because we can't just say like, we're gonna fix college completely, 287 completely, because we don't have, it would take us forever. So, but similarly speaking, we have to kind of spread it out based on the benefit and the opportunities that kind of come up, so.
But if we use that mindset, we could be focusing on I-25 forever. It's
No,
never
then
gonna-
that's what I'm saying,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be focused on, so it would still be a project approach
Okay.
to it, it's just, so it gives like, so if the council really wants their rankings,
Yeah.
do it outside of the project mindset, do it based on what type of roads these are. Maybe you could apply a small weighting to the projects that are on those corridors based on need, but then the need of the project would still speak for it.
Sure, okay.
Does that kind of make sense? So that way US 34 would still get its, you know, would think, hey, this is still a really top priority corridor, maybe it gets a slightly more weighting, but the projects can still speak for themselves, the data of the projects can still speak for themselves, and you're not gonna completely wipe out a project on 392, maybe that has a great cost benefit ratio that can solve the world, you know, that way other projects can still speak in other areas.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
So no, I'm not saying like keep going on I-25, absolutely not, but like, let's just make sure that we're not like switching it to a brand new corridor to do the same thing.
Gotcha.
If that makes sense. Let the project speak for themselves, because if there's a great project on 392 that fixes something regionally that's a good value, why wouldn't we want to support that as a priority?
Yeah, it just depends on how much of a weight.
Yeah, and maybe that's like, that's what gives the council like, hey, you have your list, it's prioritized, the quarters are prioritized, there's a small weight that gets applied to it to help boost it, but it can't overweight the rest of it. That, maybe it satisfies everybody, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, county or really that's far off of I-25 to say, because the project's on I-25 is the most important thing we're doing.
but you can't,
Well, I mean, I think, so I like that way of thinking about it. I just think that's gonna be very difficult to do in the context of like this prioritization because it, you know, I'm speaking really just personally, not even like for really, but it's like, it feels like to us, 34 is so important and there has been so much emphasis on I-25 to the point. Yeah, I don't know how.
I think a lot of communities would probably feel like that though, because, you know, I-25 is kind of like a boundary almost for a lot of them, so it doesn't, you know, it probably, I mean, again, a lot of people use US 34 from I-25, it's really correct.
Well, and not saying that I-25 is not important, I think, and I, you know, what I've heard, like, we've been very supportive of improvements on 25 from a regional perspective, because it is so important to our community. Most of, like, a lot of folks, a lot of our residents do you touch I-25, absolutely. So not saying it's not a priority, but I think it's kind of like, what is today's priority, or what is our.
Well, and that's where it's like, it's not, maybe it's the wrong word for it, maybe it's not like we're saying we need to redo I-25 today, but we're still recognizing that the function that it plays on our network, I guess.
Yeah.
The better way to put it.
Yeah.
Because again, if I-25 starts backing up all the way down through Denver, you know, it doesn't matter what we do on our east-west routes or Prospect or Mulberry or anything like that. Not saying we should keep adding more money to it, absolutely not. But I just don't also think that we should shift the entire focus to US 34 out there. Letting the data speak for the project makes a lot of sense.
So I will take a stab at updating this with the different, what does 5 points mean versus 10 points versus 15, depending on the scoring amount for the score, the criteria here. And then if those who I sent the email to, and you didn't respond, if you could please respond with what you do have to the data points that were requested, and then if the two that did respond want to send anything additional, you're welcome to do so.
Or if they're, as you're filling it out, if you're finding, I guess the reason to get this out early before this conversation was if you start to have questions or you start to say, hey, we want this to be different or whatever the things are, this was really meant as an exercise to get everyone quickly to this end outcome of having some data to put in. But if you have comments as you're filling it out or have questions, even if we want to do a group email or something to ponder these things.
And when do we think this is going to go back to council?
If we get everything hashed out at the April TAC meeting, then May, otherwise it would go. June would probably be the latest because we do need to get this to region forward.
Okay.
When do you need to have the data in order for the next time?
Do you want it sent out with the packets or the handouts?
Is that?
I mean, is the day before to not enough time for you to review everything? Or will be before you have everything?
Week before would be nice, if possible. I don't know, pressure, people can't, but it would be nice to be able to look at all this morning and start to think about.
I think that's the 9th. Yeah, so it'll go out on the 9th, so if everyone can get me their data by end of the day, as long as it's in my inbox, the morning of the 9th, I can put it in. Although I'd really like to have more, so.
Thank you for cooking the board.
Actually, to give me time, so if I have any questions or anything is not working, let's do the 7th. I did the date the 7th, that way I can work on it the 8th and then send it out.
I'm sitting like very quietly here, so
It's really hard to do. What did I say on our
call?
call? I said Martina could probably just do this prioritization for us.
Let's
because she's
bring
working
back
for all
memories,
those
right?
things.
But one of the things that I was thinking about, and to Victoria's question too, about sort of the adjacency of some of these projects, I wonder if it would be helpful to take your big spreadsheet and somehow, put it into a map, or RJS, so that, something like the Transportation Commission, they can see, it's like, here's all the projects that were recommended, right? And then for each of those projects, here's the score that went with it. So you just score them sort of individually, mobility, safety, context, asset management. I mean, here's their scores. Maybe the size of the dot is the size of the cost or something like that. So that eventually when they're starting to look at these, they're like, oh my God, there's 3 projects along 34 and look at their adjacencies. I mean, one's not as good, but gosh, if you could do all 3, that would be much better kind of thing. Or you're looking at it saying, holy crap, we're doing nothing but projects in wherever, right? Earth is getting all the money and there's nothing anywhere else. And then suddenly you're like, wait a second, how do we make this regionally a little bit more equitable? And so maybe that would be a way then, because there's always going to be some level of subjectivity that's going to get into this. And so I think the TAC's job is really to do the numbers piece and do the evaluation and provide the numbers, put it all on one map and say, all right, this is sort of what we're seeing from a technical perspective. And then you let that subjectivity go to the council. That's their job. That's not really TAC's job. And so maybe if it was on a map, then suddenly you're going to see some things that you're like, oh my God, here's a tiny little project that's whatever, in LaPorte, it costs $20,000, why wouldn't we fund that, Or maybe there's like a small project set aside, where you're like, here's all this money, let's say 2 or 3 million and knock off like 6 small projects, and then sort of do the prioritization for the rest. But maybe there's, like you, I'm a visual person, maybe there's a way that it would make a lot of sense if council, if the commission can see that.
To the cost benefit plan, it's nice to see the,
just
sort of the cost dot of, what the overall
Right.
cost of these different projects are. No, I really like that. That's
Right.
really-
So that's
You're
all.
gonna have any other for you.
So, I know. Well, I really like come up with one. So, and the only other thing I was thinking about too, I remember when we were talking about leveling the prioritization of your CIP projects, is that we sort of had this conversation about not just what the problem is, but to what degree is the project going to address the problem. Remember that what ended up being sort of a big piece. I mean, you could go spend $1 bazillion, but if it only, improves it by 10%, is it really worth it? Or, if you could make a big improvement somewhere else, would that be more worthwhile? So, that's it, I'm not gonna raise it. So,
Thank you. Thanks very much. What a fun conversation we had today. There we go. All right, anything else on this? No, anything else? All right. We will move on to our outside partner reports. The Regional Transit Agency's verbal report. Takers, okay. Mobility updates. Here. See here.
Yes, hello, sorry. Thought I was unmuted. We're just, we are continuing with the coordinated plan right now, meeting with different stakeholders, and we just introduced the public survey for it. Otherwise, we're just working on the coordinated plan primarily this year.
And not to steal your thunder, Aaron, or if Paul wants to chime in about this, about the mobility director.
Yeah. Can you hear me, Becky?
Yes.
Yeah, thanks for the prompt. So as you all know, we've been down a mobility director for a couple of months since Corey left. And so we have made a hire for that position. We're hiring a lady named Tanya Trujillo Martinez, and she is going to be joining us in the next couple of weeks. She's got a long background in the region working in public health, and we're really excited to have her coming on board. Her very first day is going to be completely filled with TDM related activities. It just happens to fall on the day that CSU is putting on a big travel demand management event. And so we're going to just, on her very first day, have her dive right in and start meeting all the stakeholders in the region. So she'll be coming to visit with the TAC and introduce herself soon.
You have a written report for the March Planning Council meeting summary, the mobility committee meetings, and the legislative updates in your packets.
There's an additional thing, Jerome, did you want to speak to that in the handouts packet?
Yeah, I was going to do that in roundtable. I could do it now. So we did get quite a few questions about Senate Bill 30, which is the increasing transportation options bill. I believe they changed the name due to some amendments. So I believe it was last week we went to the Senate Transportation and Energy Committee where they made a series of amendments to clarify what exactly that bill wants. So we got this very helpful fact sheet from the statewide NPO group that outlines the responsibilities as the bill is currently written with the amendments of NPOs and local communities. It also identifies what the goal of this bill is, which is to identify critical gaps, explore funding solutions, promote regional coordination, and prioritize safety and connectivity, which is a lot of the work we've been doing around this already. So key requirements for this bill for NPOs will be to create a transit active transportation project inventory to identify and address gaps in transit, bicycle, and pedestrian infrastructure. And these inventories will include cost estimates where available and be used for project selection and prioritization. And then we will have to provide a report on this inventory to the Transportation Legislative Review Committee all in 2026. And then for local governments in NPOs, the population of over 5,000, the only requirement is to submit planned transit, bike, and ped projects and their current plans to the NPO for regional coordination. We already do a lot of this work through our active transportation plan. We don't have too much detail on what exactly they want in terms of that, so we have to wait and see what is adopted, assuming the bill passes and is signed by the governor and all that jazz. And then there are some encourage actions, which sound like they will not be required, but encouraged, not really sure why. To identify and finish transit, bicycle, and pedestrian projects, prioritize projects in disproportionately impacted communities that reduce pollution and improve safety for vulnerable road users, establish transit, walking, and biking targets in collaboration with CDOT, NPOs, and transit agencies, and submit additional local TDM strategies to their NPO. Luckily, a lot of these things are things we've already been discussing or doing. We already do have a few, or have one bike ped related performance measure. So this bill is going to the Senate Appropriations Committee, so I'm not sure what changes they make, and then it has to go through the House, so I'm not sure if this will be the final product, but it did sound like in the committee hearing there's quite a bit of pushback's not the right word, but recommendations for amendments to clarify what is the plan, who's doing the planning, and it sounds like that has been addressed. And that's a lot on that.
And go right into the round table.
In addition to the new mobility director, we will also be having a new controller. So the accountant position changed to a controller, and she will be starting next Tuesday. It's on the 25th. Her name is Tanya Borshak.
As for City of Loveland, we're just getting ready to have a busy construction season. I think we're going to have about 4 big capital projects out in construction this summer, so a lot going on here in Loveland. We're in the final process of hiring a new transportation planner. They will start at the end of the month. So, that's all I have.
Let's see,
It's not 100% complete yet.
Clearly, we presented our mobility development plan to council last night. The final review period for that document closed earlier this month, and so we'll go back to adoption sometime next month. So I'm super excited about that. A lot of good work to come out of that effort, including our 10th Street Transit vision, which I'm very excited about getting that process underway as well. There's probably more of it. That's it for now.
Yeah. So for Weld County, a lot of things going on. For me, safety action plans kicked off, well underway. Looking at what events we want to hit up this summer and where we want to be. We have 15 communities in Weld County that have signed on the plan, so it's quite an effort just kind of making sure everybody's on the same page, I guess you could say. But it makes life fun, so that's always good. We started our CIP process of selecting projects, going through data review in a big way on our roadways, and that's always a fun time of year, but this year it comes a little early. We're trying to get it all complete before budget season, so yeah, a lot of things going on, but just a couple of updates here.
In Windsor, this coming Monday, we're going to the town board for our final work session on our roadway safety vision 0 plan, hopefully, and looking to adopt that plan soon.
Larry County, I guess again, the final push is on our safety action plan and also our transportation master plan update coming up soon. For me.
You all will be getting an email.
Thank you everyone for sending me your freight corridors or responding to the email. I will mention that the east side of I-25 has a very robust local freight corridor system, whereas the west side of I-25 has 0 local freight corridors. Something to think about. If there's any other freight data, such as any restrictions, with like where trucks are allowed to park or streets trucks aren't allowed to go on, or if there's any noise restrictions with freight, that is information I'd like to have, so please let me know. And then I mentioned it at the last TAC meeting, but hopefully between now and the next TAC meeting, the stakeholder freight survey will be sent out to all of you, so please look out for that. That's all.
Upcoming construction season work, we'll be doing a demonstration project on Center Avenue for separated bike lanes using removable bollards. College Trilby is starting construction in April, or the final phase of construction. We'll also be putting in a signal at College and Triangle. Power Trail and Harmony also, the underpass at that location will begin construction most likely in late April, early May. Advertised here the next week or two. We're also doing college signals at College in Pitkin and College in Columbia. And a Safe Routes to School project will be going in over the summer at Zach Elementary and Hector.
Timna is finishing up with our development partners, the signal at Hector and County Road 5. That will help. That will be live in the next couple weeks. And our Timna Parkway project will be wrapping up in late May and early June. We'll probably be doing a small ribbon cutting ceremony just because it's been a project that works for the past 20 years. So we'll be sending out invitations to all of you. This is kind of our first big thing.
Thank you. I don't think we have any public commenters. For the next agenda, I know we're going to do the NPO 101. We had talked about doing, but we have such a full agenda today that we pushed that off. So we will get that back on the agenda again another time. But thank you all so much. This was a fun and spirited meeting. I appreciate it. Thanks.